Welcome. My name is Cindy Passmore, and I'm the chair of the Graduate Group in Education, and it's my honor tonight to acknowledge and thank the different organizations that have made this event possible. First of all, the Graduate Group in Education, the School of Education, the Social Justice and Education Coalition, the Office of Graduate Studies, and the Office of Campus and Community Relations have all made this speaker series possible, which is a joint event between the Distinguished Educational Speakers Series and the Critical Consciousness Speakers Series. So how's that all for a mouthful? But it's all to say we're very thrilled to have this event tonight and that you are all here to enjoy the words of our speaker, a person that I was honored to be able to have a course with when I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin. So we're fellow Badgers, and I welcome you here. And I'm going to there are a number of introductions tonight, so I'm going to introduce Dr. Patricia Quijada, who's going to kick off our program. Thank you very much.
Bienvenidos, welcome. It's truly, truly an honor for all of us to have Professor Ladson-Billings here with us today. Since so much of her work centers around legitimizing the lives of young people, particularly youth of color, it is an honor as well, the lives of young people as active agents of change. It's with much honor that I introduce the Sacramento Area Youth Speaks, SAYS, and acknowledge Dr. Vajra Watson as the founding director. So please join me in welcoming SAYS. Thank you.
Our legacy is louder than the ivory tower, older than borders that divided us into being something we are not. Somehow we forgot until scholars like Ladson-Billings remind and remember us to put our tongue back into its rightful place. Be us from privilege or poverty, we mouthful of poetry, here to transform space. This is living hip-hop all up in your face.
What is it you hope to get? Is that what you aim to give? Is that how you walk and strive to live? If your paycheck was based on how much love you live to survive, would you be forced to find another gig? If folks gave birth according to the good they did, would there be any kids? If the breaths that we were allowed to take were determined by how much healing we perpetuate, would we even be? It's not the talent I look for in somebody else, it's the talent I look for inside of me. Strive to believe in the Lord you see, take time, look deep inside of me. Emerge past obstacles, keep the fight within. Return to the path of my inner soul, shining bright, waiting, anticipating me to take a walk down a path that's blind to the naked eye. Relax mind, body, and soul. His heart pounds, not a sound. Where did everything go? Remain still, my body chill, I start to float. It's been within for years, even when I take trips off the road. Born with laws in mind, written in my heart. I feel it all through my soul. No matter how old the blossom grows, the roots remain. Stand tall, love all, and be humble in these last days to sustain.
I'm on a one-way flight to the sky. The sky is the limit, but I'm breaking past the lines. Don't ask me how I'm doing, because I'll probably say fine. But what they don't know is I got an old soul. Already know what my ancestors been told. See, I be that girl from Sacramento, the city of trees, where my ancestors breathe through my lungs when I speak. Can't even look at a tree without feeling it in my feet, because my ancestors worked hard to build this country. See, I ain't never been afraid to speak what I mean, because I know what I mean. Do you know what I mean? See, Sacramento has always been the city of dreams. Took me 3 years, but I finally made the team. Now I know I'm willing to die for what I believe.
I rock the mic like weight.
I don't even need a mic. My voice is loud enough. I'm not afraid to speak up. I've been through enough. I've been through enough. We used to get beat by whips. I used to the sound from the beat. And I rip forget the slavery cage. I'll let put them in the moonlight. That's the stages. Get put in like I'm pages. You spit for the money and cars. I spit for my music with slavery scars. We try to glorify reality show stars. I'm tired of being put down. I was put down. Healthy and young. Spitting through my little tongue. Raising beauty. Go hand in hand. So I guess the spot. Then maybe because I'm doing me. Nobody else said it was going to be easy, but the put downs and boom make you feel like easy. You gotta climb to the top and never stop. I got more flow than some of you rappers, and I'm not even a rapper. My words create pictures.
Rock and roll, diction rock and rolls off my tongue. You think I was the chosen one. My words so hot and you frozen, son. I was born 2 decades late. Older than ones older than me. God has rock and molded me to be a poetess in perfect peace. You gotta say what you see and speak what you seek. Built like a brick house, I'm rock solid. Rob you of your ignorance for punish it with knowledge. I'm on another mission, no limits to my mileage. You can throw that reefer cause this spit will make you higher. You can feel the sky, huh? Inhale on your endo, Corey J in the stage. You can inhale on this info. Dictionary, missionary, preaching education. Pull up a chair and you can witness all this greatness cause I rock the mic like Moses and the Red Sea. Separate the fakes from the phonies. The wage of sin is death and your girl is so alive. False prophets, false poets, pay up and pay your fine.
More than most MCs, I bring words to the mic concerning the Black Power fight. And how being a young Black woman in America at times just don't flow right. Seems like I always have to argue and fight, attempting to bring to light my subjugation, maintained infuriation. I'm just saying, I guess they don't know I see my right to be a queen is contingent upon me knowing I have the right to be a queen. See, I rep for those women with chocolate in their skin, my brothers too, from quadroons, octagons to African Zulus. I speak for you because it's my duty to sling these words from the ghetto to the suburbs so my words can be heard, so people can say word when their hearts feel these words. We super spit, we don't stick to the script. We pick lyrical battles over mental hassles, hate when poets make a mockery out of their ancestors' struggles, so we rebuttal and struggle to let the public see that the past has a direct effect on present-day reality. Blood ties bind, and being a poet doesn't mean you only have to rhyme. It means you have to speak through your soul, take your butt home and find another route to go, you know? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Is it on? Okay, hello. All right. Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing? Okay. My name is, I feel awkward behind this because I'm usually in the middle, you know. Okay. So my name is Jenny Vargas, and I am a poet mentor educator at UC Davis with Sacramento Area Youth Speak. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my story. I was in 7th grade when I discovered SES, and I was going through a really rough time. I wasn't really into school that much, and I discovered that I was a poet through my 7th grade teacher, which happened to know Vajra Watson. So she introduced me to Vajra Watson, and that's how I got introduced into the poetry slam world, and I started competing everywhere. I started slamming everywhere, just writing poetry nonstop and performing everywhere. Then when high school came around, I really wasn't doing that great. I wasn't inspired to stay in school. I wasn't motivated. I was ditching class often. Came my senior year, and they kicked me out because they said I didn't have the grades, I wasn't gonna graduate, and I just had too many absences and just referrals to the office and things like that. But later on, I touched base with Vajra again. That's when I discovered that there was more to life and that I was actually inspired to go back to school. So that being said, I am teaching now at the school where I got kicked out of. So it's been a long road, but I'm really happy that I met SES, and not only SES, but there's a lot of people in the room that really inspired me to go to college. Like I know it's awkward, but Jesus Limon, like he's over there, but he was one of my poet mentors that really inspired me to go to college. He was actually one of the people that took me to Berkeley on my first trip. So if it wasn't for Jesus Limon and Sacramento Area Youth Speaks, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I still have a long road to go. So yeah, and then I'm gonna just spit a piece for you guys real quick, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
I was born ready. Some of y'all can't handle the truth, it's too heavy. No such thing as small minds, just trapped minds, mentally enslaved. Got your higher conscience in a cage, you got words of a sage, a star on the stage. Some say too wise for my age, I'm just aware of my place. I'm unexpected. Brains and beauty is not what you expected. I just spit truth and hope that you respect it. Ignorance spreads keep us very close, throw us in a jail cell and call it a case closed. They raised us to hate us. No knowledge of self is power. When my intelligence is lavish, you come with a breath when I start speaking Spanish. No Spanish, pero no hay vida seria. Se acaba la vida sucia, algo así inocente, si el gobierno inconsciente, el dinero y el poder es lo único en la mente de él. Mismo es que es Dios mismo, yo vengo a darte luz. Tú decides si lo aceptas. If you believe in yourself, and you believe in a God. If you believe in yourself, and you believe in a God. Fear doesn't exist, and God is living in fear. Activator, neutralizing shampoo, a wide tooth comb, and a tube of Vaseline for protective purposes. Divide your hair into 4 equal parts and begin working from the edges to the center. A relaxer is a toxic cream used to make your hair less curly and easier to straighten chemically. So eager to open it, I ripped up the box and it was a miracle. Dr. Miracle, you would never think a doctor would prescribe it. Smooth and white, I begin to mix it carefully because one mistake could be so dangerous. The smell so strong, my eyes burn. Chemicals so strong, I could taste the acid. But I begin to get more excited. This was my first time and there was no turning back from here. Time after time, I have altered my identity with the harsh toxins of a chemical relaxer. Thinking my hair had too many naps to be managed, I managed to free my hair from shame. My kinks held my sense of beauty captive. And as those harsh toxins broke down the molecular structure of my hair, my sense of beauty was exonerated and set free. Those kinks now lay straight, my edges were laid. I used to break the spines and cold. Shame blow dry. My satin and flat irons. And my forehead was way too big to have braids. I hated my nappy, and it gave me no reason to be happy, so I made my hair genetically transform into what I wanted or what I thought society would prefer, hers. I called it the creamy crack, because once you start relaxing, it became an addiction. I started fighting for that first. Hi, I was here. No more broken brushes, no more premature ponytails. The creamy crack solved my issues by burning out my DNA. Activator, neutralizing shampoo, a wide tooth comb, and a tube of Vaseline for protective purposes. Divide your hair into 4 equal parts and begin working from the edges to the center. I divided my ancestry bond into 4 equal parts and begin erasing my history from the edges to the center. This is one night to burn. For years to grow out of it just to blend in. Maybe then they will forget the color of my skin. Because if they don't see my kinks, then they don't see my history. It took me, I remember my granny. She had a pressing curl. This self-hate was taught. Generation to generation, we were taught to assimilate, to hate our white, to hate our black. Never good enough. What makes the long hair better than a kink or a curl? Our hair wasn't meant to be straight, at least not in its natural state. Invisible parts to hide the invisible spores of self-loath. Sodium hydroxide. Calcium hydroxide. Vitamin carbonate. Vitamin carbide. Chemical compounds we can't pass down expertly crowns and we were expected to wear them and be proud. So eager to open it. I ripped up the box, but it was a miracle. Dr. Miracle. You would never think a doctor would prescribe it. Activator, neutralizing shampoo, a wide tooth comb, and a tube of Vaseline for protective purposes. I divide my hair into 4 equal parts and begin working from the edges to the center.
That was wonderful. Good evening and welcome. My name is Mariama Smith-Gray, and I'm a PhD candidate in the School of Education and a member of the Social Justice Education Coalition. SJEC members, please take a moment to stand. Thank you. We are asking everyone who is seated, there's a piece of paper that has a survey. Would you please take a moment and fill that out? It could be at the end of this talk, but if you would please do that, it helps us a lot. Without you, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, I would neither have the courage nor the words to name racism. They didn't have a name for the kind of instruction I received in 1990 when I was in high school. Because Blacks were seen as culturally deprived, the literature about our successful educational experiences was limited. In response to her own poor educational experiences, my mother set out to give me a white education. After I experienced discrimination in an elite private school, she sent me to a small Black alternative public high school in West Oakland. My entire high school class, all children of color, was accepted to college. I first became aware of Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings in 1996. Everyone in my teaching credential program read The Dream Keepers, but I had lived it. Dr. Ladson-Billings' work on culturally relevant pedagogy gave a name to the kind of instruction I received at my small Black high school. In my own work, I have turned to her explanation of Cheryl Harris's property function of whiteness in education to understand how structural racism operates in student discipline. Her work paved the way for my study of the disproportionate discipline of Latino boys in schools and has helped me remain committed to justice. I am grateful to Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings for her affirming scholarship and her pioneering research, but most of all for her consistent focus on race and racism in education. Gloria Ladson-Billings is the Kellner Family Endowed Professor in Urban Education and is a faculty affiliate in the Departments of Educational Policy Studies and Afro-American Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She was the 2005-2006 president of the American Educational Research Association. Ladson-Billings' work examines the pedagogical practices of teachers who are successful with African American students. Ladson-Billings is the author of critically acclaimed books, The Dream Keepers, Successful Teachers of African American Children, Crossing Over to Canaan, The Journey of New Teachers in Diverse Classrooms, and Beyond the Big House, African American Educators on Teacher Education. She is editor of 5 other books and author of more than 100 journal articles and book chapters. She is the former editor of the American Educational Research Journal and a member of several editorial boards. Her work has won numerous scholarly awards, including the H.I. Romness Faculty Fellowship, the Spencer Postdoctoral Fellowship, and the Palmer O. Jackson Outstanding Research Award. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings.
Thank you, Mari, for that really lovely, lovely introduction. Thank you all for being here. I want a special thank you to Dean Levine. You know, I kind of understand what a dean's job is, so I know how hard it is to carve out any time to do something other than ask people for money. So, so I'm glad that you're here. And a special thank you to Cindy Passmore. You know, I love seeing badgers wherever I go. I've been nowhere in the world that I haven't encountered a badger, so. And then, of course, my heart, Patricia Quijada. We've traveled a long journey together, and I feel like a proud mother that she has landed here and is doing good work, so thank you so much, sweetheart. And I must admit, my ulterior motive for accepting this is that my grandchildren live up the road in Elk Grove. So, so I got to spend last night having like the best time ever with 3 of my 5 grandchildren who are just absolutely perfect. You know, so let me get started. I'll try to stick to the script so that I don't go on too long, but there will be a few little divergences because that's just me. But I want to just start by saying that for more than 20 years, I have been focused on helping teachers learn from the pedagogical expertise of those teachers who have been successful with African American students. I coined the term culturally relevant pedagogy to describe their work. But more recently, I have come to see how the culture that invigorates and enlivens today's students, hip-hop is the primary driver in helping maintain culturally relevant pedagogy's viability and usefulness. So in my talk tonight, I want to describe how hip-hop provides a hope for engaging students in a culturally relevant way to ensure their academic, their cultural, and their social civic success. But first, I need to start with just a acknowledgement. I've had the pleasure of working with some absolutely wonderful students, and unfortunately, life isn't always predictable, and it isn't always happy. And so I want to just make sure that I acknowledge two of my students. One is John Vietnam Nguyen, who is one of the most gifted artists I've ever met. John died a couple years ago in a swimming accident on campus. We do sit on a lake, and but I want to acknowledge his spirit because he just contributed so much to me as a teacher, and I'm going to show you a brief part of his audition tape, the reason that we invited him to come to the University of Wisconsin.
No. You talking about Dragon Tales? I was talking about Clifford the Big Red Dog. Yeah. Let me do this first, though. This is relief for burdens like the lost ones returning home. Lately it's that challenge that I'm yearning for. Yeah, insomniac that introspect, hoping I can write it all. I can't repress, I guess that's just the writer's fall. Of fallacy, emphatically I channel him trying to write these bars. But can I keep up or too distant like the dying star? Crying for a last breath, writing in the third person. Everybody's so hot, it's cause the earth is burning. Still post submissive palms folded, can I make the scene? Tell me what you know about translating dreams. Caught between the shadows, the shadow of the valley, the shadow of these dreams. What you know about what you can't see. Mental split decisions, wishing I getting what's missing. But who listen when he's spitting? Can Lord forgive him for sinning? Every day is a mission, uplifted and gifting the Chris in the present. Scriptures like blitzes, hope this kid can grip the microphone in hand and never let go. Memories of battling dualities, now I stand to be the man I be. From 93 to 4 times 2 turn sideways, now you can't see. Or do I need to clear the smoke while my lungs atrophy? Could never let it go, could never learn to balance. Could never stop these thoughts, still ain't got no answer. Still I ask the questions, do you speak or do you vouch for? Do you stand for what you say or are you lying? The outward, are you trying to hear me or do you shut me out? Am I acting foolish or is this just my doubts? Down to what's given, there's a lot of things I gotta be. A life to remember, modern me like Socrates. Do my day-to-day project all of my principles? Do we wonder why we dumb it down to simple flows? Let it be for now, I'm devoted, so pious. Still holding on till I reach the top, Zion.
That was just the spoken word part of his audition. The dance and the art parts are equally, and I'm not going to show you those parts too. And then there is Nakila Robinson. Nakila was in my class this last spring. 1 month after graduating, she died of a massive heart attack. So I always want to remember them because none of this, we have no promise that it will go on forever, and they've made just a tremendous contribution to my work and to the work of the folks on our campus. So let me get started. You know, the vision of education in the U.S. is primarily one as a vehicle for economic success. From the time that our students begin school, they receive these messages about going to school to get a good job. And while the overall economic indicators do substantiate the notion that high school graduates earn more than high school dropouts, and college graduates earn more than high school graduates, the idea that there is a direct connection between schooling and good jobs is just not there. The vicissitudes of the economy, the changing job landscape, offer no guarantees that a diploma or a degree will result in a job. My youngest son attended Cal State Chico, Of course, I couldn't figure out for the life of me why anybody wanted to go to Cal State Chico. At that time, I was teaching at Santa Clara University, so I asked my own students, I said, why would somebody pick Chico State? And they all said in unison, party school. Then it became abundantly clear to me for that particular child why he had chosen it. But he persisted and he went on a 6-year plan. You know how y'all do, right? But he got a degree in economics. He did everything he was supposed to do. But the economy went in the tank, and he could not get a job. So it can't always be, oh, you go to school, you get a job. I want to make this point to underscore that we have to help our students understand that the reason they should seek an education are larger than a job. They are linked to their own empowerment and their own liberation. So as I said, more than 20 years ago, I began investigating teachers who were successful with those students that we tend to think of as miserable failures in our current schools, particularly African Americans. And I came to call this work culturally relevant pedagogy. Now I want to back up a little bit and ask the question, how many of you have seen the documentary Babies? Okay, so a number of you. If you haven't seen it, please see this film. But I want to show you the trailer because I want to make a point here about who we are as human beings.
Everything is lost. But I know that you can take it to the Lord. Everything you want. Is it all that you can gather for yourself? Do you love a lot? Is that love that Jesus gives to everyone? It's is it strange that you prove that you made yourself? Everything is lost. Still I know that you can take it to the Lord.
I like to show that clip to remind us how incredibly similar we are. These 4 babies are in 4 different parts of the world. They have different languages, they have different cultures, but they are doing the same thing. And the 2 things they are doing is, number 1, trying to figure out how do I interact with the environment that I find myself in? And number 2, how do I interact with the people that I encounter? Those 2 things are exactly what every young person who shows up at our school is trying to figure out. How do I interact in this environment? How do I interact with the people? And when students find environments that seem hostile, then they do things that try to pull themselves out of that environment. So I think that's kind of a basic premise for thinking about human beings and and particularly the young people we work with. So this work that I've done, this culturally relevant pedagogy work, is kind of a theoretical construct that either you've encountered it in that text, The Dream Keepers, or in the more theoretical scholarly piece that was in the American Educational Research Journal. This notion of culturally relevant pedagogy involves 3 propositions: supporting student learning, developing cultural competence, and encouraging a socio-political consciousness. And I want to briefly discuss what I mean by each of these, and then how they apply not only to K-12 students, but even those that we want to cultivate as teachers who will implement culturally relevant teaching in their classrooms. So the first proposition appears so obvious it might seem unnecessary to even talk about it, this idea of supporting student learning. But I want to make the point that much of what happens in classrooms, especially college and university classrooms, has little to do with what students learn. Instead, the focus is on what teachers cover. Many of my own colleagues are proud that a certain number of their students do not pass their courses because they associate high failure rates with increased rigor. They see their courses as sieves that allow only a small percentage of students to get through. But if we think about a culturally relevant approach to teaching, we see student learning as the goal for every student. And rather than creating a sieve, culturally relevant teachers create a net designed to catch up all the students. Because the goal is not coverage, it is mastery. One of the tasks of a course that I offer entitled Culturally Relevant Pedagogy is to have my students go observe teaching in some place other than the School of Education. So I'm making this presumption that people in the School of Education can teach. And it may be a big presumption, but I make it so that I don't have to call out any of my colleagues. So I ask my students to go outside of the school and look. So they are encouraged to go to other professional schools. They can go to the law school, the business schools, to the School of Medicine. They can go to other parts of the university, to our College of Letters and Sciences, the College of Agriculture and Life Science. I even encourage them to look at teaching in non-traditional settings, such as a swim class or Tai Chi, yoga, or athletic coaching. And a couple years ago, one of my students did her observation of teaching in the medical school's cadaver lab. And what she described was an excellent example of a teacher who was focused on mastery, not coverage. The lab was comprised of students in groups of 8, and 2 of the students in each group had been in the lab earlier and completed the lab on the renal system the day before. Their task was to teach the renal system to the 6 other students in their group. The medical professor and a mortician were also in the lab as resources and observing from group to group. The 2 student teachers were detailed and meticulous about their teaching. They were quizzing the students in their group throughout, checking to make sure every student fully understood the renal system. And the reason the students were so careful with their group members was that the medical professor would eventually choose 2 of the students in their group to take the lab exam for the entire group. The grade that those 2 students received would be averaged and given to everyone in the group. The medical school is looking for maximum competence from its soon-to-be doctors, not coverage from its professors. So what might it mean for us to develop teachers who demanded this kind of high-level performance from all of our students? The second component of culturally relevant pedagogy is perhaps the most misunderstood. Because when I use the term cultural competence, I'm referring to one's ability to be firmly grounded in his or her own culture of origin and fluent in at least one other culture. For most students of color, this generally means that they develop a deep understanding and appreciation of their own heritage, history, language, and customs, while also accessing the mainstream culture. But white middle-class students are not exempt from developing cultural competence. And although schools typically cater directly to their culture, they too need to become fluent in at least one other culture. In an ideal world, all of our students would leave school multiculturally competent to be able to deal facilely with the cosmopolitan global world in which they will find themselves. At minimum, every student should leave school at least biculturally competent. But how can we develop culturally competent students if our teachers are culturally incompetent? The third component of culturally relevant pedagogy, socio-political consciousness, is the most ignored. Teachers understand the need to ensure student learning, and some are sympathetic to supporting students' cultural competence. However, the idea of helping students engage directly in the social and civic concerns of their schools, communities, localities, the nation, and the world seems beyond the scope of most classroom teachers. In plain English, I call this component the so what factor, because students regularly ask us why they have to learn particular things. And we regularly respond with, because you're going to need this one day. By about 4th or 5th grade, they realize we are lying. You're never going to need this. And those who are savvy learn, or should I say memorize, what we teach in order to pass our tests and to pass our classes. Those who are less plugged into school resist in ways that are detrimental to their own academic well-being. So a culturally relevant approach to teaching helps the students understand that their learning can be and should be connected to the everyday problems of living in a society, particularly one that is deeply divided along racial, ethnic, linguistic, economic, environmental, social, political, and cultural lines. And they should be learning that education can and should help alleviate those problems and those divisions. This is the whole point that Thomas Jefferson had in mind when he talked about the need for an educated citizenry. So now I stand here more than 20 years past my first inquiries on culturally relevant pedagogy, and I find that the notion of culturally relevant pedagogy, at least my understanding and practice of it, is evolving in some new and exciting ways. And those new ways are what I want to focus the remainder of my remarks on. How culturally relevant pedagogy can meet the needs of new century students and their teachers, regardless of level, that is from elementary school through graduate school. So first I have a question for you. How many of you are on Twitter? Okay, that's good. And there's Russell Hustle 13 here. Okay. You gonna call me out like that, bro? He knows what that's about. If you're on Twitter, that's great. But if you're not, you're already behind the curve, at least with New Century students. We're looking at the most technologically astute, plugged in, globally connected generation that the world has ever seen. However, when I walk into most schools, I see signs admonishing students against cell phone use. I was in a school a couple summers ago in Indianapolis, and I walked into a classroom that had signs on the door that read, "No cell phones, no cell phones, no cell phones." And I really wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, it's not a phone, it's a computer. This totally different understanding of devices is but one example of how New Century students are different from their counterparts of earlier generations. Each year, Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin conducts what they call the Mindset List, for its incoming freshmen. And a couple years ago, the class of 2016 mindset list included some of the following. I'm going to just pick out about 10 of the 75 things they have on this list. But basically what they're saying is our freshmen have always lived in cyberspace, addicted to a new generation of electronic narcotics, right? That's always been their life. That Michael Jackson's family, not the Kennedys, constitute American royalty. If they miss the Daily Show, they can get their news on YouTube. Bill Clinton is a senior statesman of whose presidency they have little knowledge. They have never seen an airplane ticket. You know, it's still like, what you mean ticket? I got my boarding pass. It's like there's actually a ticket behind that, you know. For them, women have always piloted warplanes and space shuttles. Star Wars has always been just a film. It's not a defense strategy, right? They have come to political consciousness during a time of increasing doubt about America's future. The Twilight Zone involves vampires, not Rod Serling. And they watch television everywhere but on television. I know, I have one of them living in my house. She commandeers my family room where I have a very good, nice flat screen TV. She never turns it on, but she's got her devices up, right? Now, I've shared just 10 of the 75 items on the mindset list to underscore how rapidly new technologies have widened the generation gap. Those aging baby boomers who have always considered themselves hip and cool and with it are struggling to connect with Generation Y students who will eventually teach what I term new century students. Now, while I haven't conducted a scientific study of new century students, I've made what I think are some testable observations about them as learners. And I think we have to consider these tendencies as we evaluate our own teaching. So they believe that multitasking is an efficient way to work. Now, all the cognitive scientists say it's not, but that doesn't stop them from working that way. And as I said, I have one at home, and she's got the computer up, she's got her iPod, she's instant messaging, she's tweeting. I mean, she's doing all of these things at the same time. They also see themselves more as consumers than students. And as such, they are either purchasing an education or shopping for schools. And if you're buying something, the last thing you want to buy is a D, right? If you think you're buying it, you want to buy A's and B's. And so we always end up having these battles about what people earn as grades. They receive their news and information via push notices from their favorite internet sites and blogs and programs like The Daily Show. And although heavily invested in social justice, they are less sanguine about social welfare, particularly if they have to bear the costs. So the health care debate, that's what that was about. I'm healthy. Why do I have to pay for these sick old people? And I often have to remind them that they did not pay the bill in the maternity ward. Okay, so you already in the hole. You already owe, right? It's the same issue around Social Security. They don't want to pay Social Security. They don't want to pay for those old people. They don't understand that, you know, Social Security is not a savings account. You are paying into it for the current recipients. If they can't get it, I remind them it's like the Lion King. It's the circle of life, okay? You will one day get your turn at it, you know. For them, email is an old technology, so stop sending them emails. They would prefer to communicate via instant messaging and tweets. For them, library research can best be done on their desktop, which means they rarely leaf through an entire journal. And here's a little secret. Some of the best articles I ever found were the ones I wasn't looking for, because I actually had the journal in my hand. So yeah, I knew what I was supposed to find, but then I was like, oh, this is interesting. But they don't do that. They go straight to the electronic article. They believe it's important to stay connected, and thus their cell phones are always at hand. And classes that prohibit cell phone use actually interrupt their connections. Before the midterm elections, I was moderating an NAACP-sponsored candidates forum. And in Wisconsin, we were really anxious about a decision regarding voter ID laws that folks in the legislature were trying to push through. And one of the candidates near the end of the forum announced that the judge had ruled and that had put a stay on it. And one of my little young friends said, and we broke out in applause. And one of my young friends said, y'all just found that out? Because she was on her device the whole time. She said, oh, that came like 40 minutes ago, But that's their life, right? That they always are up to date. And really important for us at the college level is that they have very different conceptions of copyright, intellectual property, and plagiarism rules. And I think we assume that they know these things, but they're living in a place, a time when they can sample and everything is a mashup, and they do their mixtapes, and they think that they could actually do that in their work, and it's our job to teach them. So I offer these observations not to suggest that we have to adapt to their standards, but rather to suggest it is important to know where they are so that we can do a better job of understanding and assisting them in the classrooms and beyond. A decade ago, when people referenced the digital divide, they were talking solely about the way that social status, that is, class, race, or ethnicity, kept some students from accessing electronic information. However, with the advent of smartphones and tablet computing and other mobile devices, electronic communication is now ubiquitous. Even in developing nations, mobile devices provide access to information and global communications in the classroom. So the new digital divide is that which exists between generations. The teacher that's on that flip phone, with the factory ring, that's the phone I make my husband stay on because he just can't go to the next level. We can't do that. But that teacher is unable to keep up with his or her smartphone using students to maintain live Twitter feeds or classroom blogs. And I do have a live Twitter feed in my classes. I create a hashtag for the class. To me, that's the new note passing. And so if you're going to pass a note, let's pass a note about the stuff we're talking about, right? And so when our students can access information and knowledge via iTunes U and other open access online classrooms, we must create more imaginative and engaging spaces in our courses. Now, the next point I want to make is probably the most controversial thing I'll say, and that is that hip-hop can be an important cultural vehicle for connecting with new century students. Now, before I lose the entire audience, I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting the over 40 crowd should adopt the hip-hop aesthetic, okay? But rather, the anthropologist in me believes that it is important to know as much about a culture with which you will work as possible. So when I was teaching Puerto Rican students in North Philadelphia, I began a deep and rigorous study of Puerto Rican culture and the specifics of the 2 Puerto Rican communities that had made their way to Philadelphia. Knowing more about those cultures helped me plan relevant learning activities, increase my communication with the parents, and boosted student success. It did not make me Puerto Rican. Similarly, when I moved to California, I needed to do the same kind of research as I work with Chicano and Mexican national students. Again, knowing more about Mexican and Mexican-American culture did not make me Mexican or Mexican-American. It made me better able to serve the needs of the students who sat in front of me each day. And it's interesting to me that Madison Avenue actually gets it. So I want to I want to talk about the fact that when I did the study in 1989 in Dream Keepers, the focus was much more on cultural history. It was on community issues like things like urban renewal, or veterans' concerns, homelessness. But it had a limited focus on student culture. Okay, I had one teacher who actually used rap lyrics in the teaching of poetry, but basically, that's not what the teachers were doing. It's not what I was looking for. And it turns out that there's something about youth culture that is so important in really reaching kids, and I make this point that Madison Avenue actually gets it. So today's Dream Keepers know that they need to include popular culture in their understanding of culture. They need to recognize hip-hop's longevity. You guys been saying for 40 years, that ain't gonna last. Now we got kids whose parents are hip-hop heads. It's going to last. And like I said, we need to catch up with Madison Avenue. So I want to give you an example. There's a very old commercial.
You watch me get Fred's Fruity Pebbles. Who are you? I'm the master rapper, and I'm here to sing. I love Fruity Pebbles in a major way. He loves Fruity Pebbles in a major way. The bedrock yellow, orange, purple, lime, and red. But to get the fruity taste, I gotta trick Fred. Fruity. To get the fruity taste, he's gotta trick Fred. Barney. Guess that's a wrap. Most Fruity Pebbles cereal, part of this nutritious breakfast. Yabba-dabba delicious.
Now, nobody's had any Fruity Pebbles in a minute, so that's an old commercial. But think about the way Barney presents himself as a member of Run DMC, right? He got the pork pie hat, he got the big chain, and he got, these guys never wear shoes, but Barney got on, he got on sneakers, right? And then you got Fred scratching on the ones, But they understood that there's something in that hip-hop aesthetic that speaks to kids. And somehow, as educators, we've ignored that. Today's students are in some ways what I would call a new breed. I've called them new century students because of their deep connection to hip-hop. And I think there's something like shapeshifters, because they don't fit neatly into the categories of race, class, gender, or national origin that we have relied upon to make distinctions and to create hierarchy. Their sports heroes and heroines include Kobe Bryant and Jeremy Lin, Gabby Douglas and Lolo Jones. They listen to Justin Bieber, well, maybe not Justin, Justin got some issues. But Bruno Mars and Nicki Minaj, they are more likely to endorse same-sex marriage, and they can separate out hip-hop traditions. Where baby boomers and their parents heard it all as noise, I want to remind you that our parents called rock and roll and rhythm and blues noise. They point out that there are some important differences between various folks. So there's not just one kind of hip-hop, but they know, for example, there's differences between Lil Wayne and Immortal Technique, Lil Kim and Anna Tijoux. They know that this culture that they've created is a mashup with permeable boundaries. They are simultaneously sacred and profane, with deep religious convictions and an embrace of all things secular. So MCs like Lupe Fiasco and Omar Offendum do not hide their Muslim faith. They work in local, national, and global contexts with music and film about Trayvon Martin and Arab Spring. Bay Area hip-hop filmmaker Eli Jacob Fantauzi makes global hip-hop films. And I hear for Eli? All right. But he's made films like Inventos, Hip Hop Cubanos, and Homegrown, Hip Life in Ghana, And Eli's wrapped up a film now on hip-hop in Colombia, and he's done another one. He's working in Tanzania. I mean, amazing, amazing work. So I want to talk about the fact that it's important for us to be thinking about the connection of the old and the new. If you know the work of psychologist Wade Boykin, back in 1983, he talked about what he called 9 dimensions of African culture, basically saying anywhere you go in the world where there are African descent people, you're going to see these dimensions. Not necessarily everybody participating in them, but you will be able to locate them. Spirituality, harmony, movement, verve, communalism, expressive individualism, morality, social time perspective. But we also live in an American culture where there are, quote, American values. And they include things like a kind of rugged individualism, competition and free enterprise, rationalism, control of things, be it time or environment, change, equality and egalitarianism, privacy, future orientation and self-help. And our kids are in both of these places, accessing both of these sort of value systems. But it's interesting to me that among these New Century students, they've figured out ways to express themselves in these cultures on their own terms. So if you take a concept like movement that Wade Boykin talks about, this emphasis on interweaving of movement, rhythm, percussion, music, dance that is central to psychological health, well, we recognize that as movement. We'll pay big money to go see Alvin Ailey, right? But that's also movement. Verve, the propensity for high levels of stimulation, energetic, and lively action, right? So if you've been to New Orleans, you come back from a funeral, or you there for Mardi Gras, if you've seen a second line, you know what that's all about. Of course, in schools, we tend to call that ADD. So I have often had to go tell teachers that, no, my child has verve. You leave that alone, he got verve. He ain't taking no medications, he ain't going out of the classroom. You're gonna have to learn to adjust and to adapt. But that's verve too. Being on the ones and twos is getting it in and moving, right? And having that stimulation. Communalism is a commitment to social connectedness and social bonds and responsibility that transcend individual privileges. In other words, what does the group want? I don't care what you want to do with the song. If you're in the choir, you got to sing it like the rest of us, right? Every hip-hop head I know got a crew. It's not just about them. You know, my favorite of all-time group, well, it's a tie between Tribe Called Quest, but I really, really love the Wu-Tang Clan. I love the Wu-Tang Clan, you know, and don't nobody mess with the Wu-Tang Clan, you know, because the Wu-Tang Clan don't play, right? But at the same time that there is that kind of communalism, there is an expressive individualism. That there's a cultivation of a distinctive personality and a proclivity for spontaneous, genuine personal expression. So I'm in the group, but I also have my own little stamp on things. So when Sister so-and-so wear that hat, that's not how the hat was designed, but that's how she gonna wear it. And if you buy the hat, you better not wear it like she wearing it, right? Because she made this is her way of wearing it. But this is expressive individualism too. Yeah, we all wearing baggy jeans, well, you know, we got a little something to make ours special. And orality, a kind of preference for oral and oral modes of speaking and communication and speaking and listening that are treated as performances. Our love for Martin Luther King is about his ability to speak. We love listening to him. And quite frankly, this is the dopest MC I know. And light as a rock, okay? So here is this whole, it's their version of the enduring expressions of our culture. These young people that we are working with are not slackers who don't care about education. Quite the contrary. They desire to be deeply engaged in learning. They don't want to receive a passive education with rote memorization and regurgitation that passes for learning. They want to innovate and create and implement. They are, as hip-hop science educator Chris Emden of Teachers College, Columbia says, science-minded. That's Chris right here. You got to get to know this guy. He's a bench scientist who was one of the dopest hip-hop guys I know, right? They want to do science rather than just read about it. And scholars like Jeff Duncan Andrade, who you probably know from San Francisco State, and Patrick Kamenan from USF, and Ernest Morrell from Teachers College. Other folks like Dawn Alyssa Fisher from San Francisco State, Dr. Elaine Richardson, AKA Dr. E from Ohio State, and my own colleague Maisha Wynn from Wisconsin, all understand why it's important for university scholars and researchers to stay engaged with communities and schools as teachers and community activists. Morehouse College professor Mark Lamont Hill has found ways to engage media and conduct research. So many of you may see Mark on CNN. He also is a correspondent for BET. They're not just doing one thing. They're reaching out to communities. H. Sammy Aleem from Stanford is working in hip-hop and global context, and Sam Seidel, who is working with T.C. Ellis, has helped to document the work of the High School of the Recording Arts, where what you see there are students who were previously headed for failure, begin to gain a second chance and put their knowledge and skills in popular culture and the arts to work for both fun and profit. So Sam started doing this work because, well, I'll let him tell you.
When I was 20 years old, I started teaching at a juvenile prison. While there were many things that separated us, I quickly discovered my students and I had one big thing in common: our love of hip-hop. For the next few years, rap music became the main content for the classes I taught, and I saw disengaged students emerge as leaders and experts. Through engaging elements of hip-hop culture together, students and I learned language arts, life skills, and to love each other and ourselves more. As I continued to observe the ways in which our education system is rigged against Black and Latino students and students from low-income communities, I asked myself what else we as educators could learn from hip-hop, the insanely innovative and influential global phenomenon that has emerged from those very same communities. When I say hip-hop, I'm not just talking about music or music, graffiti, and dance, which are considered its central elements. I'm referring to the blend of instincts, confidence, and ingenuity that develops in oppressed communities, as has been demonstrated through the evolution of hip-hop culture. I'm talking about a Jamaican teenager in the South Bronx taking two records of the same song and fading back and forth between them to create a new musical composition by playing the most danceable segment over and over. I'm talking about aspiring visual artists realizing they didn't need galleries to represent them for their work to be seen, and instead painting on train cars and instantly having an audience of hundreds of thousands. I'm talking about a high school dropout from the projects of Marcy using his entrepreneurial hustle and rap skills to go from selling drugs to selling CDs out of the trunk of his car to selling products at Macy's. This is what my colleagues and I call hip-hop genius, creative resourcefulness in the face of limited resources, or as it is often said in the hip-hop community, flipping something out of nothing. How can this audacious approach impact our education system? For starters, we need to exhibit the brash creativity of hip-hop's pioneers. Just as hip-hop producers sampled songs from other genres, creating unique new sounds to please audiences' ears, hip-hop educators can borrow from diverse models and improvise innovative blends of educational practices customized to meet students' needs. If that sounds too abstract, take a look at the High School for Recording Arts in Minnesota, where they've mixed project-based learning and competency-based assessment with artistic, vocational, and business training with dual enrollment at local colleges with a heavy dose of student leadership. We don't have to do the same thing that's been done before or follow one model. We can sample and mix multiple teaching techniques and school designs to find the blends that best serve our students. We also need to adopt the value hip-hop places on staying fresh. A hot beat yesterday was a hot beat yesterday. Whoever sets out to make a hot beat today has to do something new and different to remain relevant. The world is changing rapidly around us. The top 10 jobs in 2010 didn't exist 6 years earlier. Hip-hop's premium on freshness must permeate our schools. And we need to be resourceful. In the 1970s, thousands of families chose to replace their linoleum floors. In poor neighborhoods, the old linoleum was left in piles on the street. Young people, without access to playgrounds or dance classes, turned their parents' trash into dance floors and invented new moves like the windmill and the headspin to maximize its potential. Faced with our own resource constraints, educators need to find new platforms. What refuse could we be dancing on? And what are our new moves? Behind the mic, spray cans, turntables, and when it comes to their educations, students have brilliant ideas and instincts. Hip-hop genius is not just about teachers using hip-hop songs to get kids to succeed in traditional schools. It's about changing education to respect and build from young people's brilliance. It's about the incredible possibilities that occur when students are engaged, not as consumers, but as creators. We don't need to tweak the content inside existing traditional academic structures. We need to think outside the classroom and build institutions that are fundamentally more responsive to young people's interests and ingenuity. We need to create schools and school systems that not only teach hip-hop, they are hip-hop.
So when we start talking about this, of course, the first thing people say is, well, I kind of get it in English. You know, it's another form of literacy. And I might get it a little bit in music and the arts. And I could possibly stretch to get it in social studies, given what content you take up. So we've been on this quest to get it in the places where you wouldn't expect it. And so we have a group in New York that Chris Emden started that called Science Genius. And so we now have it in science. And to give you just a taste of what it looks like, we've been working with 14 different high schools, and the first year we had the kids compete, and they're on stage at Teachers College giving doing their work that has to be scientifically sound, but it also has to be lyrically and artistically correct. One of our judges is the Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. He wanted to be involved because he said, you know, I always loved science. I hated school, but I love science. So I want to show you the 2013 winner, I believe this is.
Fifth group, actually, it's not a group, it's an individual. He's representing Harlem, Urban Assembly School for the Performing Arts. Come on up and do it, man.
What's up with it? Drop that, sound guy. I'm about to tell y'all a little something about work and kinetic energy, all right? So clap your hands for me, please. Check. Yo, yeah, this concept is applied to all lives. We strive times distance, be a witness to the prize. Be a man, understand you comprehending this is vital. Work equals FD, the equation for survival. Your only rival is friction, don't get caught up in the drag. You better prepare, cause obstacles fight back. When you get knocked down, no, please don't cry. Just get up and apply more force next time. One day, I was dreaming with a really strong hope that I'll make it, but to make it takes more than just believing. These resistance/demons were kinda holding me back, and I let them. But the simple way to get me on track was force times this place is work, no debate. I'll take that concept, apply it to my mistakes, and now I'm progressing, a natural rap genius. I'ma get an A if I see this on the regen. Here's a lesson, I know it kinda hurts, but if you truly wanna work, then there must be progression, cause FD equals W, the rule, and the unit measurement for the product is called joules. Cool, I did the work, I'ma try to let it flow. The more people I know, kinetic energy grows, so I'ma go to work, convert all of my potential, and as my feet increases, then I'ma grow exponential. The work has been applied. If my equations are correct, the energy that is left creates a domino effect. My mass is what I'm bringing to the table. Underestimate your wish that you had brought a bigger dinner plate. Separate me from the fakes, let me educate. Velocity's my following, and that's what I'ma generate. Through these shows and gigs, just overcoming all the friction to the point where friction doesn't even make a difference. I feed my interest with the laws of physics. When M and V multiplies, the picture is painted vivid. The work was just something that got me inside the door. Now we squaring the V and it's exponentially more. I got a lot in store for the V's, cause I'm progressing my M. And when you multiply them, there's no end to the kinetic energy. You better be prepared. Filling you up with envy with my 1FMB squared. Yo, here's a lesson. I know it kinda hurts, but if you truly wanna work, then there must be progression. Cause FD equals W's the rule. And the unit measurement for the product is called joules. Cool, I did the work. I'ma try to let it flow. The more people I know, kinetic energy grows. So I'ma go to work, convert all of my potential. And as my speed increases, then I'ma go exponential.
Now, when we met Jabari, he didn't know what he was going to do. He was struggling. He had no intention of going to college. Well, Jabari is now a sophomore at Hunter College. He is now a mentor for the next group of Science Genius participants. He has presented at AERA, at the Anthropology Association, and he said, I didn't know I could do this. I mean, I knew I could perform. I didn't know I could learn science in this way. This last year's winner was a young woman, so I mean, we're getting just an incredible group of young people engaged in this work. And it isn't just at the K-12 level. Where I am at the University of Wisconsin, we are in our 8th cohort of what's called First Wave, which is a group of young people that we seek out because of their hip-hop ability, their spoken word, artist, dancing ability. And so I want to share, as I wrap up, an example of one of the students I've had the pleasure of working with, Jonathan Williams. You're going to see his winning performance for a national competition called Raise Up. And Raise Up is all about helping kids to not drop out of school. Jonathan was this year's winner, and you're going to see the performance that he had at this year's Kennedy Center in D.C.
We have our national final Raise Up champion, Raise Up winner and champion. His name is Jonathan Williams. He's out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I want y'all to give it up for Jonathan Williams, y'all.
Jonathan Williams, absent. See, I always had the mental capacity and the master key to overcome any academic tragedy, but I had to see and learn from my faults. Because my rotten GPA were where my lessons were taught. I was a 3.6 high achiever up in middle school. No guidance resided in my silence, and swimming pools didn't appreciate the doggy paddle that I had mastered when Jonathan Williams was absent. Alexander Hamilton High, Milwaukee Public Schools finest. I learned the art of skipping classes and wrote Bueller on my eyelids. Detention room sidekick with some fly kicks and a tight click. Balled up homework in the same fist these students fight with. Jonathan Williams, absent. It was tragic. Amidst good times and laughing, my GPA was dragging against a system not meant for me, mentally in misery. My freshman year stats, 102 days absent. All Fs, 0.0 GPA, cumulative. Swimming pool, doggy paddle. Drowning. I started a movement for improvement, but couldn't dry off with the white towels my teachers threw in. I tried to show my mind can grow like every other student, but people pass on your perspective when your presence also truant. More than a reflection of a freshman year screw up with a blueprint of a ladder, but no tools for me to move up. No electricity, mom and pop's missing, so have them drop out. That's just family tradition. Jonathan Williams, absent. I found a flashlight by the name of Uncle Jeff. Moved in. The floor and 3 pillows were enough for me to stay focused, make sure this hopeless ship stays floating. By my senior year, I was actually a senior. Hey, you know, dressed a little cleaner, professional demeanor. It seems to be I'm on track like Jackie Joyner with 6 medals, fighting my academic debt and my 5th medal. But the worst thing you can see when you made it and educated are the people who gave up and them obstacles you evaded. Because I mean, we quicker to give up than you do. I mean, we just like YouTube, we just broadcast ourselves and hope that you like it. Maybe care to comment, because I didn't need to be hooked on phonics, I just needed the people around me to be critical and honest, because we don't know yet that resources and allocated money is the hood's morphine. The only scholarships I knew of was professional sports teams. Now I'm here. I'm at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. A scholar and resident, full tuition scholarship and Kappa Alpha Psi president. So I'm saying we can be useless, clueless, ruthless, just a nuisance, worthless, workless, just the worst urban person, but we gotta reconstruct our approach to avoid these different labels and synonyms and help the youth overcome this system that's not meant for them. Thank you.
Jonathan has just returned from a semester abroad in Madrid, Spain. I've just wrote his graduate recommendation. He wants to go to USC and pursue an MFA in arts. He has performed at NCTE, the ASA, the Sociological Association, the NC2A, along with all of our other students. The author of Can't Stop, Won't Stop, Jeff Chang, his son is in our 8th cohort. So we have these fabulous young people to work with. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, I can never do this kind of work. You know, I'm too old, I'm too white, I just can't, right? But if you have any inclination, I would invite you to join us Tuesday nights on Twitter. Get a Twitter account at #HipHopEd. It's 9 o'clock Eastern, so that puts it at about 6 o'clock your time. For 1 hour, we have conversations every Tuesday night about how we integrate hip hop into the curriculum, how do we take current day issues. I think the other day the conversation is about what can we learn from Selma, the film, and how can hip hop contribute to that. So please, you don't have to say anything. You can just get on and read the feeds. And I've met a lot of, middle-aged white teachers who say, man, I'm just learning so much just reading. I don't, and then many of them will get brave enough a little bit later to join us and be a part of that conversation. I think we have this marvelous opportunity to engage with the most exciting generation of young students the world has ever seen. Their passions and desires merge with new and exciting technologies. There's a group of us who are now looking at changing from culturally relevant to a kind of culturally sustaining. Every summer at UW-Madison, we offer a week-long institute for teachers called Hip Hop in the Heartland, where we help them figure out how they might integrate aspects of hip hop into their work. And my new work with folks like Jeff Chang, that's Jeff right there, Samuel Leem, and Django Parrish, is we're looking at the notion of culturally sustaining pedagogy. It's allowing us to go back and look at some of the work in indigenous communities, bringing that forward. One of my favorite spoken word artists is a Menominee Indian named Tall Paul, who just wrecks it. I mean, he is so, so good, and he's incorporating the Ojibwe language into, because it's dying, and what he's finding by using the hip hop aesthetic, he can get young kids to want to learn to speak their native language. So as I said, I think our young people's passions and desires merge with new and exciting technologies. They want teachers who will demand more from them than Googling some information and cutting and pasting it into a document. They want to do and create. They want to inspire and innovate. They want to learn to think critically and analytically. They want their hip hop to be our hip hope. Thank you. Correct, we have a few Q&A, time for a couple answers, questions, probably not as many as you'd like, but we want to be a little bit responsive to you, so questions? Yes?
Sister, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
American African Studies here at UC Davis. I teach one of the few courses that's entitled Hip-Hop Culture and Sociology, Hip-Hop in Urban America, and Hip-Hop Culture and Globalization. And I have been telling my colleagues for eons that we're teaching the hip-hop generation. We must learn the aesthetics of hip-hop and incorporate that into our teaching methodology in order to hook them into understanding theory in a whole new way, coming from their culture. And I think that you showed us very, very clearly tonight how that can work in all subjects in academia. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yes?
So I just had a question. At what point, I really vibe with cultural competency in the classroom. I think it's going to make a difference for especially young Black youth, because that's where my heart is. So for, I guess, for teachers who do not identify with any of the, like they don't identify with the ethnicity of their student, at what point does it become like cultural appropriation versus trying to, versus cultural competency? Like, some people could have interpreted the Fruity Pebbles commercial as cultural appropriation. It just depends on people's consciousness. So where does that fine balance between the two?
Right. So the thing is, we're not trying to make people be something they're not. And kids see through that right away. They realize that that's fake. That's not who you are. Well, on the other hand, we're trying to get people to understand more about where kids are coming from and help to bridge and kind of scaffold what kids know with what we want them to know. Yes, their parents want them to learn American edited English. And I call it American edited English. I don't call it standard because I've traveled the world and the standard is all over the place, right? But American edited English, that version of English that we use in formal settings and everyday experiences, I'll tell on my Santa Clara students. I use an audio tape that is a very old tape. I've had it since, it came from 1968. It's an interview of a man in East Palo Alto, and he is just talking about the trauma that his educational experience is about. And he speaks in African American vernacular English. Well, my students at Santa Clara were saying, well, if he had just learned to speak standard English, his life would be so much better. And so I said, oh, so that's the issue, his language, okay. So what they didn't know in a subsequent session, when they were working together, I audio taped them. Then I transcribed their conversation and gave it back to them. Now this is what it sounded like. Oh my God. And then he was like, oh my God. I was like, and then I said, oh my God. And then, okay. Now, we're chuckling, but that's their informal register, and they have a right to have that. I don't have a right to say that that's a cognitive disability on their part. They are going to code switch when they go in to get the interview. They're going to code switch when they put something on paper, and our kids come in with language. And it is our job to help them code switch and know the appropriate places, but not to steal that language from them. So I think as a teacher who is outside of a culture, you have the responsibility to learn more about it, learn more about its history, its language, its customs, and not necessarily try to turn yourself into that, but to be receptive and understanding of where kids are coming from. I mean, that's the learning curve I've been on around hip hop. You know, I'm an R&B girl, right? You know, I mean, I was when the first hip hop came out, I was a grown A girl, you know. I wasn't no kid when, you know, they start talking about Sugar Hill Gang, you know, and Grandmaster Flash. I mean, so I've been in the game a long time, and I finally just realized this is where the kids are drawing deeply from. I mean, to me, one of the most beautiful moments in Selma is at the end when John Legend and Common, because they merged the events of 1964 with today, you know, and that's kind of how kids are moving back and forth across these various terrains. I think I can take one more before we leave. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for having this call. My sister Gloria invited me today.
Oh, good.
My question is, I come all the way from Los Angeles, Million Child School District, and I saw that you had an example for science and English language arts, and I was curious if you also had examples in mathematics.
So yes, we do. We're actually working through an entire curriculum. There's an artist, a former producer in Atlanta that has a curriculum called Bridging the Gap, and believe it or not, he has paired it to the Common Core standards. And he's got English, he's got mathematics. I mean, the creativity is so evident among these young people, and we're missing an incredible opportunity. The other thing that I think is really important, and Sister talked about teaching this course on hip hop in the global context, is this is a worldwide phenomenon. This is not just something in Compton. This is not something in the Bronx. I've been to South Africa, I've been to Beijing, I've been to Sweden. I was in Sweden walking down the street, and I had some graduate students with me, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, did the beat just drop? And I could hear this thing going, and I'm like, we're going in here. So we went in this place. This cat was freestyling. I don't know one word he was saying, but he was getting it in Swedish. So I'm thinking, this is a gift that our children have given the world, and we keep spending time trying to get rid of it, and we don't want to talk about this. Most of my first wave students don't want to be artists. They just love doing this work. They want to be chemists, and so they major in chemistry. I have a wonderful clip from a young man that we found in Milwaukee, a piece he did called Extreme Heat, all about environmental global warming and the impact of heat, the degree heat arises in Milwaukee on particularly the very young and the very old. We met him and invited him to come to First Wave, and I asked him, I said, well, what do you want to study? He says, I want to be a climatologist, actually. Last year, that young man graduated with a degree in environmental studies. Now, he performed, but he didn't want to be a rapper. He wants to be able to understand the world on his own terms. So that's the kind of work we're trying to do with this. And right now, I believe Marta Diaz has been able to document over 400 hip-hop programs across this country. So we're trying, and it's in some of the, the loftiest institutions. The hip-hop archive is housed at Harvard, so if it's good for them, it's probably real good for the rest of us. So I thank you very much.
So I'll ask you to stay up here a minute. I'm Harold Levine, and I'm Dean of the School of Education, and it's just really wonderful to have you all here. We're thrilled that you could be here tonight. I'm also an R&B guy, but it looks like I'm going to have to be a hashtag hip-hop ed guy. Before I thank Dr. Ladson-Billings, I also want to thank Vajra Watson and the wonderful SES artists that were here earlier, all of you.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's been a marvelous evening, and a talk that's, I think, forced me, but I think all of us here to think about education and the kind of education system that we want in this country and the kind of youth that we're trying to serve. Gloria, I want to thank you for your humor, your warmth, and also your insights and your deep knowledge about how education can, should, and must engage today's young people, all young people, but including and especially young people of color. There are a lot of things that you've said tonight that have resonated with me, and I want to go back to, I think, the thing that you said the most that has hit me most deeply, and it was at the very beginning of your talk. And that is, and I'm thinking now about what my job is as an educator and a dean of a school, and that is to develop an educational system and educational practices, and these are your words, that are linked to our students and linked to our students not in terms of finding them jobs and being contributors to today's economy, but an education that is about students finding, identifying, and acting on their own liberation and empowerment. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Now, Orlando's reminding me, please fill out the surveys. But one last thing, and I know some of you heard me with this story before, but bear with me. So UC Davis has many things to be proud of and many things that we do extremely well here. We all know about wine and viticulture and enology, and we know about engineering and the arts and School of Education, of course. We also on this campus have an olive center, and which is relatively new, and it came about, and we also produce olive oil at UC Davis. And this came about because for years we've had an olive problem on the campus. For those of you who don't know, there are 100-year-old olive trees on this campus, and every year when they fruited and dropped, it was a mess. And there were lawsuits against the university because bicyclists would ride along, flip over because of the hard olives, and sue the university. So, and the university spent thousands of dollars every year cleaning up the mess. One day, a groundsman said, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Why don't we make olive oil? And so it's like making lemonade out of lemons. So this is our little gift to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and have a good evening.